Dragon's Dogma 2 is a very unique game with a lot of unique different features. One of these unique features that makes Dragon's Dogma 2 its own title is the pawn system. Pawns are these AI companions that will accompany you through your journey, making fighting easier and also adventuring a bit more convenient. You can have up to 3 with you at a time, and they can each have different vocations, which is nice if you're looking for a wide range of options to fight anybody. So naturally it got me thinking, what if pawns were not in Dragon's Dogma 2? How difficult would it make the game, and how different would my gameplay be in general? Well, today we're going to find out by playing Dragon's Dogma 2 without pawns. The rules here are pretty simple. I cannot hire any pawns or take my main pawn with me, and I cannot use any boosts to add an extra challenge. This means I won't be using any materials from the Deluxe Edition, and I will not be using any extracts that you can get, which boosts your stats and makes fighting easier. Everything else is on the table though, so let's get started. As we make our way through the opening sequences, we eventually awaken to this excavation jail where we, the main character, are located. Fiska, the master here, asks us what we look like, so off to the character creator we go. Now there are a couple things to know about the character creator, mainly about height and weight. The taller you are and the longer your limbs are, the easier time you're going to have as far as reach and reaching higher places goes. And you also get a running boost from how long your legs are. And on the other side of things, weight will affect your stamina and your carrying capacity. The heavier you are, the more you can carry naturally, and also the more stamina you'll start out with, but the lower your regen will be. Also, you can choose between the human and beastren races, and given that this is my second playthrough and I've already played as a human character, I decided to go with a beastren and a female beastren at that. We make her tall and lanky, and because I'm not very creative, we then name her Kitty. Of course, the vocation is just as important as what your character looks like and its attributes are, so I'm going to go with the thief vocation. Initially, I was going to go with mage, but on a test playthrough, it turns out that there's not really much you can do at close range, so thief should be a good alternative. The upside here is that I can use the vocation action swift step to swiftly dodge any sort of moves that the enemy throws my way, as long as I time it properly, and the versatility and the mobility of the thief's kit and skills should be a nice alternative. After creating our character, we meet up with Rook to go carry some rocks, and it is here where we encounter a Medusa for the first time. The fight is simple enough. We climb on her back and deal damage to her head until she has enough and goes away, and we encounter literal God who compels Rook to then take us to the edge of a cliff where we jump and miraculously ride on the back of a griffin. God stares longingly as we fly away, doing exactly what he told us to do, and we are promptly shot down by the Melv squad and then awaken next to a river. Unfortunately, Rook was not as lucky as us to land on dry land, so he gets swallowed up by the brine.
If you're truly the Arisen, then our paths will surely cross again.
Our paths will indeed not cross again. After surviving this whole ordeal, we meet up with Justin, who misspells his name with one extra N, and we encounter our first wave of goblins. Thankfully, goblins are as weak as they sound in this game, and they go down pretty easily. Another thing that you'll probably notice through this playthrough is that this is my first time playing the thief vocation, so there's a lot that I don't know initially, but I do get better over time, so this should be a good gauge if you're looking to just start a playthrough like this, with how well the run will probably start out and how well it'll finish at the end. Now, on our way to the encampment, it's important that we gather as many materials as possible because we do not have a mage in our party, because we can't have any pawns, of course. Gathering materials early is very important for heals and also stamina regen, so we make sure to gather as much as possible on our way there. The second wave of goblins ends pretty quickly with me tossing the shielded goblin away and then executing at the end. And there's level 2 to give us a nice boost. As we make our way to the encampment, we encounter a load of pawns that we cannot use in our journey at all. So while this interaction is a nice set piece, we unfortunately will not be getting any boons from it. As this is something we're forced to do, I go ahead and make a generic pawn and set him to mage, and unfortunately one of my rules is broken already because my pawn in his infinite wisdom decides to heal me while a cutscene is playing, so I can't skip it. Thankfully, the effect is minuscule at this point in the run through because we do have to sleep and regain all our health anyway, but due to his transgressions, we're going to give him a nice little brining. Of course, the game then tells us that we can revive our main pawn if we so choose by touching a riftstone, but as long as we don't touch any riftstones out in the wild, we should be good and will not gain our main pawn. Since we're in the encampment, we're going to go ahead and gather our first Seeker token. We'll remember this for later, and I think this is a good time to talk about our main goals for the Thief playthrough in this solo run. Of course, a lot of the early game is going to be centered around getting through as many quests as possible to get as much experience as possible. Level ups are king in Dragon's Dogma 2, so I'm going to be doing as many side quests as I can, although I don't really know where all of them are, so I don't get every single one of them, but I do get a significant portion of them. I'll try not to show every single one of them, especially in the late game, but I will give some highlights. As far as skills and augments go, I definitely want to get the majority of the Thief's augments along with the Dominance augment from the Warrior vocation, so I will be swapping over at some point and getting it to rank 9, which is is the maximum. And the main skills I'm going to be using for the thief vocation are going to be gut and run, which evolves to draw and quarter, enkindled blades, which will upgrade to ignited blades later, ensnare, which will upgrade to implicate, and finally smokescreen, which will then upgrade to smoke shroud. Draw and quarter is going to be our main source of damage, as it lets you deal a massive amount of damage and knockdown power whenever you're clinging to a monster. It does make you let go if you're climbing a monster, so against flying enemies we're going to have to time it pretty well, but the damage it does is insane, and it'll also pair very nicely with ignited blades, which will allow us to gain a fire boon on our weapons, which is going to be nice since most monsters are going to be weak to fire and we don't have a mage in our party. Ensnare or implicate is going to be great for flying enemies as well as any lone smaller enemies, and will allow us to execute them on impact pretty much. And finally, smoke shroud is going to make smaller enemies a bit trivial because we can immediately turn our heavy attack into a delete button. Now I know that a lot of thief players are going to be calling out the fact that you can use the Blades of the Pyre and the Formless Feint Meister's teaching that you can gain a bit later on in the story. When these things are paired, you can both ignite your blades and create massive explosions while dodging with the Formless Feint skill. While this is a good combo, I do elect to not take it with me because the action economy that you're gaining with these two skills is a bit poor. I can pretty much dodge anything I want to with the Thief's Vocation action, I can set fire to my blades with a skill of its own, and the ability to use an extra skill that does something different other than Formless Feint is a bit more economical than using two skills to do one action. Plus, I think the coverage is a little bit better if we take Smoke Shroud instead of using Formless Feint. So that's the long and short of it there. In order to start out our playthrough, we're going to also make sure we gather 30 secret tokens because there are two major items that I want to gather along the way. And for the early to mid game, they're actually pretty nice on the Thief Vocation, and as long as you're picking up secret tokens, it's practically free. Of course, we'll be upgrading our weapons and armor to in-game gear as we get there, but for the early and mid game, this is probably one of the best strategies you can use for the Thief Vocation. Now, continuing with our encampment quests, we're going to stop by Joffrey here to start a gathering quest, and we'll also talk to Phil, who gives us a timed quest to go save Ricardo from any harpies that are in the area. As we head out of the encampment, luckily we have Baron, who is the warrior vocation meister near us, so I take him with me on this particular quest because harpies are going to be a nuisance to deal with, and I throw them at any enemies that I have in my way. While fighting, I live out my dreams of becoming a speed demon and also make short work of these women with wings. Ricardo has now been saved and returns to the encampment, and we return for our reward. And there's level 4. Next we head on over to Marcus, who needs help with the gathering quests, and we combine materials to make Salubrious Drought and also give him some Harspuds. Thankfully, Joffrey is pleased, and we go ahead and complete that quest, and now it's time to head off to Melve to continue the story. We make sure to pick up the second secret token along the way, and now we get into this goblin fight, which will exemplify why fighting without pawns can be a bit challenging at times. There actually is a significant strength in numbers at the beginning of the game due to a stat called knockdown resistance. If there are a lot of small enemies focused on you, they can easily take advantage of staggering you and knocking you down repeatedly, therefore making it so that you can't attack them back. This is another reason why I picked the Thief Vocation, because you at least have some tools to be able to get out of the way and then return some damage a little bit later in the fight. And thankfully that's what carries me through here, which allows me to get to level 5 and Thief rank 2. There, secret token number 3. We make sure to pick up this free money right by the graveyard in Melve, and now we have arrived. Unfortunately, it's around this time that my character's amnesia kicks in and we start getting memories from the past. We start hearing voices in our head and also start seeing dragon visions. Thankfully, this girl who shot us down earlier is there to witness it, and she takes us to our bed and nurses us back to health. We get a rundown from her that apparently we saved her from the dragon attack whenever it attacked the village, and then the queen at the time then cursed us and sent us to the pawn excavation site, and then we flew away on a griffin and made our way back here, so now we've gone full circle. Unfortunately, this tender moment is not to last as we get interrupted by this guy named Gregor. He's here to escort us back to Vernworth to then judge whether or not we are a true Arisen, and he sets his men to gather at the front gate so that we can get going. Before we set out, he directs us to meet up with Leonard so that we can get some vocation information, and as we go to do that, we're met with our first true side quest. This little girl named Flora needs us to make some fruit rubberant for her, so we do so and get a nice little reward. And while we're distracted from our main objective, we go ahead and gather a few more items. We make sure to gather these early spellbooks from the top of Ulrika's house. We make sure to get this secret token from the top of the battlement, which makes for number 4. And I think I can make this jump. but clearly it's not meant to be. Let's take the stairs next time. Gonna pick up some green varish, and there's seeker token number 5. And now we can talk to Lennart. Lennart explains that Ulrika's not really his daughter, but he thinks of her as one, and also offers to teach us about vocations. Thankfully, I already know what I need to know, and I go ahead and equip Helm Splitter and Enkindled Blades for the trip ahead. Helm Splitter is a pretty good skill as far as early damage goes, but the main reason I'm picking it is because it allows you to jump higher than you normally would be able to. This is going to help us get to hard to reach places for some seeker tokens we can get later. As we exit the inn, Dahlia calls us to the front saying that the party is ready to go, but before we do that, we do have to meet with Lennart again to clear out some saurians. There's one explosive barrel, hey, level 6, and there's a poison pot. After we turn in the quest, we make sure to get a good night's sleep, and now we're ready to venture out for Melv. On the way out, we do encounter some more goblins, which we make short work of with my small army of soldiers, and we managed to hit level 7. Feels nice. And while we're on our way to the gatekeeper, there is seeker token number 6 and a nice little chest. As we meet up with gatekeeper Stanley, he explains that there's been quite a number of pretending Arisens, meaning fakes, and that they're seeking to take the sovereign's place. However, Gregor, our escort, seems to indicate that we escort pawns around and therefore cannot be a pretender, but I haven't seen any pawns since I threw that one off the top. Oh yeah, that's another thing. If you're missing your main pawn, then other pawns out on the road won't actually interrupt your play in order to ask to join your party, which is a cool little feature if that's something that's annoying to you. Anyway, after we make it past and witness a landslide, we then encounter quite a number of fights on our way over. Alright, just got a Helm Splitter up. There we go. There's seeker token number 7. Ooh, a nice little neck wrap. And seeker token number 8. As we make our way forward, we can see that a Cyclops has actually dammed our path, so now we gotta take him out. Unfortunately, my aim was a little bit off, I guess, or the game was just feeling sadistic, so as I tossed the explosive barrel to then let the rush of water sweep away the Cyclops, it actually missed, so now I have a full-on Cyclops to contend with, so that's a nice little touch. Unfortunately, my damage is a bit lacking at this point, but I still know where his weak points are, so we try to make the best that we can. Thankfully, the Cyclops isn't smart enough to really reach up to his eye quite a lot, so we end up getting a lot of free hits off. My brain hatches an idea, and I realize that there are these boulders right next to where the waterfall was, so I pick one up and slam one right into the Cyclops' eye, which knocks him off balance. Now that he's knocked unconscious, I can go in to perform an execution and get a lot of damage off. As the Cyclops gets up, there's more than one boulder remaining, so we toss the other one off, all while making sure to drag the Cyclops' leg to knock him off balance, and with one last ding of his head, he is now slain. And there's level 8. After defeating the Cyclops, we make sure to meet up with the ox cart and set off for our journey to Vernworth. Of course, we do get raided at night by goblins along the way, so we make quick work of them and now hop back in the ox cart and enter a cutscene. We meet up with Brant, who pretends to question us about our true intentions and if we're an Arisen or not, but turns out he's on our side and then explains the situation. Regent Queen Disa has been ruling the kingdom in the regular sovereign's stead and has installed a fake one to take its place. She's trying to pave the way for her son Sven to take the throne, but we kind of threw a wrench in that whole thing whenever we became an Arisen in Melv. So now we're in some kind of political conflict and we need to work our way through bit by bit. But we hit level 9 first and also bump into her son Sven. We make sure to get on his good side by hiding him from the guards, and he will remember us later for our good deeds. As he rushes away, we can start doing some early looting of Vernworth. This will give us some materials to sell for some early gold, which will be very important for buying things later on. Again, our build for the early and mid game hinges on our seeker tokens and much less our gold, and there's also some armor we can pick up along the way in Vernworth, so buying weapons and armor early on is not something that we want to do. As we loot around, we make sure to get the port crystal in Vernworth, make sure to get this money bag in the inn. There are some early throat cutters in seeker token number 9. Make sure to sell all of that. There's seeker token number 10 on the aqueduct, and now we can equip Ensnare and also Concussive Step so that we can can reach some early places for more secret tokens. It's also at this point that the Vocation Guild assigns me the quest to unlock the Warrior and Sorcerer vocations, and I do want to make sure I get the Warrior unlocked, so we go ahead and take it, and we'll do that later. Alright, let's go meet up with Brant and start some quests. I love how Brant decides to meet you at night to keep it all secret, but he's still dressed up in his official gear. Like, you could have at least changed into some carpenter's garb to at least give yourself some sort of disguise. Anyway, he tells us about the political turmoil and gives us the monster culling, Disa's plot, and caged magistrate quests. Thankfully, we can start doing quests that don't involve combat, so the fact that we have lower stats than normal and no pawns means that we won't be hindered too much. In order to make some early gold, we can also go ahead and raid the comptroller's house for the courtly breeches and the courtly tunic, which we'll be using later. And as part of Disa's plot, we can actually meet up with this guard at night who will lead us to the castle, and now we have the Marcher's set, which will allow us to have some decent armor value for lower weight gear. And this is what I was talking about when I said that you don't really need to buy any armor, you can always just get this Marcher's set. And as far as stealth missions go, I know that some people have been having problems with them, but honestly I haven't been caught once. Maybe it's because I've been wearing the Marcher's set, but I seriously haven't been caught by a guard once whenever I try this. Alright, rush into the room to get the torn letter, have a nice little distraction by Sven, and out the window we go, and now it's time to head down to the sewers down by the jail. While we're here, we pick up some jaspers, go ahead and get the second Marcher set with the cape included, secret token number 11, and now let's go talk to that magistrate. As we talk to Waldar, he tells us he doesn't really want to leave because he's able to read everything he wants to. He also weirdly makes us disrobe so that we can prove that we're Arisen. He's a bit of a weirdo. But now we gotta go find him a good place to read, so we're gonna go ahead and go over to the Gracious Hand over here where we can meet up with the leader of the Gracious Hand, known as Kendrick. He explains that a little kid named Malcolm has gone missing after searching for a particular area. He suggests we ask around to the other kids to see if he said anything before he left. Eventually we meet up with enough kids to learn that he headed out to the Gracious Hand's vaults to go for a little bit of exploring. After we clear out some rubble, we head in and find Malcolm pretty shortly. Hey, there's secret token number 12, and Malcolm leads us to an archive which contains a number of tomes that we can find useful for selling later. This is also going to be a great place for Waldar to continue reading, so we're going to head out and make sure to inform him of the situation. On our way to Waldar, we meet up with this lady named Mildred who asks us to house sit her house for a week, which is great because this is kind of a free inn that we can stay at and deposit our materials in. We agree to house sit for this complete stranger and then head off to Waldar to tell him about the archive. On our way, we make sure to pick up secret token number 13 on this sewer grate, and we inform Waldar about the archive. After breaking him out of jail and showing him to the archives, we go ahead and return to Brant to complete our quests, reach level 10, and now we've started the Stolen Throne and Nameless Village quests. These are another set of quests which don't really involve combat, so they're great for early levels, and the Nameless Village will be on the way to the Monster Calling quest, which is a nice way to take care of two birds in one stone. Before we head out, we make sure to get the Heraldic Cape from inside the Sovereign Quarters. We go ahead and raid the Watchtower and get some loot from here. Alright, deposited that in the materials section. Oh, there's a Saurian attack, and yep, that's a spear going straight through me while Bernal is talking to me. That's nice. As if my frames couldn't drop any lower. Alright, let's return to the house. Oh, there's still virtue from Brant, and now it's time to sleep until night. As we awake, it looks like we have a spy that's trailing us, so we chase him down and make sure he's captured by Brant. He suspects that he's an agent from Batal come to spy on us, but we won't really know much until after Brant's soldiers are done questioning him. Off to the masquerade we go. At the masquerade, we discover a hidden door there in the back, and we are on our way to Wilhelmina's bordery when she catches us in the act and offers to safeguard our passage. We decide not to invade the Sovereign's privacy while he violates the lady's privacy. And there's Queen Disa and also a guy named Phasus who is going to be important later. As we make our way out, Wilhelmina offers us a card so that we can return to her facility, I guess we'll call it, in case we have any need for tomfoolery, I guess. Before we leave, there are a couple secret tokens I want to make sure to get. Alright, missed my step there. Okay, so that makes 19 secret tokens. Let's go ahead and start an unsettling encounter and also turn in the Stolen Throne. There's secret token number 20, and oh, I guess we're gonna start Oxcart Courier without meaning to. And there's secret token number 21, and let's rest until morning. I just really hate harpies, dude. Alright, so that's secret token number 26, and I'm just going to try to concussive stuff. Okay. Oh, that's a weird place to fall. Guess I'll use a wake stone. This leads to an embarrassing section where I can't really get off of this weird little ledge, so I actually have to fairy stone off after a few attempts. It's kind of frustrating, honestly. Just gonna go out and make sure to get the rest of the secret tokens, and oh, well, that's a griffin in the distance. Can't really pass that up. I guess I should be pretty thankful that there's this false Arisen party right next to me, because they're actually helping out quite a bit. So there's like 6 people in total helping me to take down this griffin. I really just wanted to use this as a limit test, but we're actually doing fairly well against it. Oh wait, I know this one. I saw this in a Twitter clip once. Yeah, there we go. Get some levels off of that. There's level 11. And level 12. Didn't really get any loot from that, but the levels are nice. Just gonna quickly rest real quick. Alright, there's secret token number 27. Number 28. Alright, let's try to fight these bandits. It's actually kind of crazy. I'm getting kind of forced out because of all the numbers here. I don't quite have Smoke Shroud yet. That would be really useful here. And that's the last of them, thankfully. Secret token number 29. Just one more, so close. Thief rank 4. That's nice. Alright, and the last secret token I need should be right inside this coastal cavern here after I fight these Saurians. And there we go, there is level 13 and secret token number 30. Let's go ahead and get over to Vernworth. And with this upgrade, we've officially made it into mid-game. We have dowsing spikes, which are some of the most powerful daggers that you can get early on, and we also have the Ring of Vehemence and the Ring of Triumph, which is fantastic. Now we can get a nice little ping whenever chests are nearby, and the early knockdown power is insane. Alright, now that we've got our little power boost, let's go ahead and continue Oxcart Courier. And oh, what's this? That's right, we get the Lesser Dragon fight in Melve. Time to take that on, I guess. The Lesser Dragon fight is actually a pretty decent challenge at this point. Thankfully, I got the dowsing spikes before I decided to take this on, and unfortunately, we do die once from fall damage whenever it tries to fly away, so we gotta reload and try it again. I also made the great decision to not actually rest before this fight, so I'm actually going in with about a quarter of my health left, so that's awesome. Just gonna focus on these weak spots. Thankfully, Sigurd's little shields are applying to me as well, which is really nice. I wonder if I could just sit back and let them attack it for me. Nah, I gotta go in. Alright, big damage there. And away it flies. Fantastic. I'm gonna grab that Worm's Life Crystal for later. And after witnessing our valor in that fight, Leonard decides to give us Riotous Fury, which is the Meister's teaching for fighter. Unfortunately, we won't really use it, but I decided to mention it anyway. We can also turn in the letter for Oxcart Courier as well, which is nice. While we're over here in Melve, I'm going to go ahead and equip Smokescreen. We unlocked that earlier whenever we got Thief rank number 4. And now it's time to ride back to Vernworth to complete the Oxcart Courier quest. We go ahead and sleep the night away and meet up with Mildred, who's the one that allowed us to house sit for a while. She decides to sell us the house for 20,000 gold, which thankfully from our early gold, we're able to purchase with no issue. And that's how you get a house in this economy. Just gonna head on over to the Nameless Village to complete that quest, and on the way we actually encounter a Cyclops, and that goes down with no problem. Hey, there's level 14. And this here is why you want Enkindled Blades as an option here. You want to make sure you're able to deal with any sort of immunities, and thankfully Enkindled Blades allows us to do that with these slimes here. And after traveling a short ways up the road, we meet up with the party that is handling the monster culling quest and make short work of them with our dowsing spikes. After completing that part of the quest, we easily get level 15, and now it's time to loop around the eastern forest and check out this disturbance that I'm seeing in the distance. Turns out it's a minotaur fighting some choppers. We'll need to approach this with some strategy involved. First, we make sure to kill off all the adds or all the choppers first to make sure that we don't get any staggers. And Enkindled Blades is actually going to come in pretty handy here. Minotaurs are pretty flammable, and the extra burning damage is going to do quite a lot for us early on. Another little mechanic that makes the solo run a little bit easier is you can actually quickly heal up whenever your health reaches 0. 0, which oddly enough will prevent you from dying, so we'll be using that quite a lot from here on out. Thankfully, Minotaurs are pretty easy to deal with as long as you have a wall next to you. Whenever it decides to charge at you, you just simply dash out of the way and attack it while it's down. After about a minute or so of fighting, we make short work of them and reach Thief rank number 5, which is pretty nice. Shortly after, we make our way to the Nameless Village and get interrupted by a definitely not Thiefmeister, and proceed to loot what looks to be a pretty poor village. We ask the local townsfolk about Arthur, which they seem to know nothing about, but thankfully they do offer Vocation Guild services, which allows me to equip the gratification augment from Thief. This augment in particular is pretty nice because it's going to allow us to heal off of any enemies that we slay with the final hit, so in the long run it's going to save us a lot of curatives whenever we're facing a lot of smaller enemies. We move ahead to the village mansion where we meet Flawed, who is the self-proclaimed Thiefmeister and gives us Blades of the Pyre, but as we mentioned earlier, we won't really be using this skill all that much, and also it doesn't even have the Meister's teaching outline on it, which makes me think that this isn't really the Thiefmeister. Thankfully, we discover an underground entrance and head in, which will lead us to the actual Thiefmeister. He tells us that the false sovereign is not as he seems. Arthur is actually a fugitive named Dara, who these guys used to train. So with him leaving, faking his own death, and then becoming false sovereign, they're not very happy with him. As he gives us a document claiming for his arrest, Srael also teaches us Formless Feint, which is the Thiefmeister's teaching. As mentioned before, we won't be using it, but in the next room we do get a bunch of Thief armor, which is as good a gift as any at this point. We then leave the village and head back to Vernworth on foot. We take a couple fights, reaching level 16 and 17 respectively, and finally sell everything off to get 100,000 gold very early on. It really is easy to get pretty rich in this game pretty early, and I'm not even doing the most optimized method either. It's actually kind of ridiculous. And similar to what we mentioned earlier, there are ways to get weapons and armor that are pretty good without having to spend money on them too, so you can really get a lot of money pretty easily. Anyway, we return to Brant to complete the Arisen Shadow and Nameless Village, and we proceed to start an unsettling encounter. This is centered around an official named Allard, who is not a very kind individual. We'll be dealing with him later.
What business could be so pressing that I must be summoned at this late hour?
I swear, you would think the walls are made of paper around here, but nope, they're actually stone brick, and you can still hear literally everything through the door. As we wait for him to leave his office, we then sneak around, find his hidden passage, and then seek the Batali crested letter. As we try to escape through an open window like before, we then meet up with Wilhelmina yet again, who bails us out yet again. I'm not really sure why she keeps doing this. She keeps putting her own life in danger to protect someone she doesn't even know is the Arisen. I wonder if literal God is doing his whole manipulation thing again. That would be the only way to get a woman around here, right? Anyway, me and Wilhelmina have a moment, and then we are approached by Roman in the courtyard to then restore his Regalia sword, which will start the Dulled Steel Cold Forge quest, which is important for dwarven upgrades. We will happily accept that quest and then continue on towards the Harv Village part of Monster Culling. I swear, you can't walk 5 feet without the local giving you a warm welcome of some kind. Thankfully, I'm able to give this armored Cyclops an even warmer welcome and then destroy him. He gives some nice experience and some nice loot. These harpies are not very nice either. That's probably why they're called harpies. Nice little double ensnare though. As I'm making my way to Harv Village, I know of a griffin spawn up here that is going to always be there, so I figured might as well limit tests now that I'm completely alone and without some fake Arisens. I am level 17 after all, so this should go pretty well. As it turns out, Enkindled Blades is absolutely overpowered against anything with wings, and the griffin goes down pretty quickly every time I use him. While it's not exactly what I would call a knockdown, it appears to be an elemental weakness based knockdown. Either way, as soon as the griffin hits the ground, we're able to get a nice little riposte off and continue our onslaught of damage. The fire damage also prevents the griffin from flying away, which is a nice touch given that I don't have any range attacks. Well, I guess you could count ensnare or implicate as a ranged attack technically, but it doesn't really do the same as an archer, for example. Anyway, after a few minutes of fighting and sidestepping with my swift step ability, the fight pretty much goes as exactly as you would imagine, and we're able to get some final hits off on the griffin to finish it off. This gives me just enough experience to reach level 18, which is pretty nice. After completely destroying all these innocent bunnies on the way to Hard Village, we enter the cutscene and then unlock Mystic Spearhand because I forgot to earlier. Sigurd also has some nice supplies that I will be picking up as well. I should probably also mention that I won't be using the Mystic Spearhand vocation at all in this playthrough, but I figured at the time that picking it up might be useful. Turns out I was wrong. We then meet up with Dylan for the monster culling quest, and he tells us about all his friends who are currently dying in the cavern below to Saurians, which I don't know why he's out here if he has friends that are dying. I guess he's just a coward. But anyway, if he has enough time to stand out here and allow his friends to die, I guess I do too, because I have this lovely little port crystal to activate and a nice village elder to tell me about all the truths of the world. This guy is definitely not a former Arisen who definitely did not see the truth of the world, and he's definitely an insane elder who definitely won't be making any references that will be related to us later. Definitely not. I also have no idea why he has all this really weird loot in his house, like a fairy stone or a stoutness extract. Very not suspicious. After wasting in-game hours, we finally decide to dive into the cave to go beat up some Saurians and save the soldier. After doing so, we return to Dylan and explain that his friend is safe, thankfully, because his friend's a coward, but we're not done with the cave yet because there's some drip I want to grab. Several Saurians later, we reach level 19, and there's a Saurian scale cape, and that is much better than what I had before. On our way out of the cave, Fiorin then tells us that our job slaying Saurians is not done and the village is overrun, so we encounter all of 4 Saurians and save the village from yet more destruction. Not that it's my place to judge, but there is an entire Saurian cave on the outskirts of the town. You would think that they would take care of that to prevent more Saurians from attacking their village, but I guess not. Also, as we saw earlier with the coastal cave fight, the Saurians actually drown in the brine, so it's not like they can come from the water, so I'm not exactly sure why they don't just get a band of adventurers to go into the Saurian cave and then just destroy all the eggs that they have there to prevent them from coming back. Like, this is a very solvable problem, and yet he continues to have it. Anyway, as we clear the pest problem for now, we go ahead and head on over to Trevo Mine, which is where we'll encounter the Archistaff and the two-hander. We also clear up the rest of the monster culling quest. We managed to get Thief rank 6 while we're there, and we Fairy Stone back to Vernworth. I guess I should probably explain the Fairy Stone and Port Crystal system. You see, you need to plant a Port Crystal or activate one in order to use a Fairy Stone to then teleport to it. It's a very limited fast travel system that the game has implemented, and Fairy Stones are pretty rare or expensive to get. Port Crystals are even more rare, and some of them are portable, so you can actually place them around the game world. Thankfully, Vernworth and Hard Village have dedicated Port Crystals, so I can simply teleport to them anytime I want, as long as I have a Fairy Stone. That'll be important later. As we turn in the Vocation Frustration quest, I realize that, oh shoot, there is no Archistaff in my inventory. I must have forgotten to grab it. Well, Warrior is the main one that I want, and I'm glad that I actually turned it in, but I won't be using it immediately. I want to max out Thief first. While we're here, I guess I'll go ahead and equip Gut and Run and unequip Helm Splitter, which will allow me to do massive damage while I'm clinging to monsters, which is very useful. And I turn in the Monster Culling quest, which will give me a nice little bit of XP, which will get me to level 20. Very nice. The next morning, we head on over to Melv and witness an argument between Ulrika and Martin. Unfortunately, Queen Disa is going to be blaming the entire dragon attack and Melv's damage on Ulrika herself, since she is the leader, even though that there is a northern stronghold that Melv is being drawn from. But the queen is kind of stupid anyway, so no one really cares. But Ulrika is depressed enough to allow us to sleep with her. In the middle of the night, she leaves and Lennart clarifies the situation, so we then go and try to find her as requested. Before we go over to where she's found, we go ahead and visit Baron, who is just outside the encampment. I want to make sure to do enough of his quests so he gives me the Arc of Might, which will be very useful whenever I switch over to Warrior for the augment for knockdown power. And it is here that he tells us that he needs an apprentice and also a few swords. So with that information in mind, I go ahead and teleport back to Hard Village, clear out some more Saurians, and witness a petty squabble, and then finally find Ulrika. So with this information, I can finally tell Lennart where she is, but first I'm going to go ahead and head to Trevo Mine and get those grievous horns that I missed the first time. On our way there, we encounter the first Drake of our playthrough, and it is here that I will be testing my strength for real this time. When fighting a Drake, as long as you deal enough damage to its head with enough skills, you can expose its heart and then attack its heart directly. We don't really get to that point in this fight, but it's important to note for fighting in the future. I'm not really sure why this Drake is just hanging out in front of Hard Village when there is literally an entire village to attack right next to him. It's very odd to me. But nonetheless, we easily dodge most of his attacks and deal some significant damage to his head, as mentioned before. There's also this weird thing that happens whenever you first encounter a Drake, where he mentions that you are his silent-hearted kin, which gives me a bit of a lore question as to whether or not Drakes and Arisen are related. I know that in the first Dragon's Dogma there was some sort of hint hinting that drakes were actually failed Arisen, but in this game it seems that the dynamic is just a little bit different. If Arisen are related to drakes, but drakes are also lesser dragons, does that make us related to the dragon in any way? I mean, I know we're all part of the same cycle, etc., but lesser drakes shouldn't really be a thing unless there is a specific mechanic to make them dragons, right? Maybe it's something to do with the rift, and that's sort of the MacGuffin for the entire Dragon's Dogma 2 universe, etc. I don't really know, but the drake takes literally 1 health bar of damage and then flies away, which leaves me with a nice little Worm's Life crystal reward. Anyway, that's enough of that distraction. There is the Grievous Horns in Trevo Mine. We're going to go ahead and turn that in. Get attacked by Saurians and Vernworth again. I don't know why they're suddenly appearing in my second playthrough as opposed to my first one. But anyway, in the middle of that, we meet up with Humphrey, who is then going to head off to Baron, and we reach level 21. After meeting up with Glyndar for the first time to start his archery quest, we're going to go ahead and head back to Melve to inform Leonard of Ulrika's location. While we're here, we'll go ahead and save Norbert as well, escorting him back to Melve, and then Ferrystone back to Hard Village, to then flex on the village elder with Ulrika. On our way to the village cave to slay even more Saurians, I swear, this is a problem that they can easily solve. I don't know why they still have this problem, but Ulrika's blushing, so I guess we'll go ahead and help them out. We go ahead and save Zoran, who is the scapegoat for last time, and the local populace goes ahead and elects Ulrika's village chief in a very storybook-esque way. After meeting up with everyone yet again, we go ahead and Ferrystone back to Vernworth, and I swear, I'm using these things pretty liberally it seems, but there are enough Ferrystones to go around. I'm not really sure why I'm spamming them as much as I am. Probably should be saving more of them, but we're going to go ahead and equip Archer while we're here, and go ahead and show Glyndar how to shoot a bow. There's something very ironic about an Arisen showing Glyndar how to shoot a bow. Like, this guy has been training all of his life to be a master archer, yet we equip the vocation for the first time and can shoot absolutely straight the very first time. He then goes on to explain how bad elves are at engineering bows for keen aim despite their entire society being centered around it. Well, I guess that's not technically true, but they do have the whole trial of archery and everything and coming of age because of it. But anyway, despite all that, we reach level 22 and Ferrystone back to Vernworth. Again, I'm just spamming Ferrystones. Apparently I have a ton of them. We re-equip Thief and head back to Melve to then find that Melve is actually on guard with Thesis forces. I swear, this chick just wants to take over the entire kingdom while she's at it. After we pass on through without arousing suspicion, despite being the Arisen, we meet up with Leonard, who wants to incite a little rebellion, and he asks us to go ahead and bring him some weapons so that they can get on with the Boogaloo. We agree to help him put some dirt in Thesis' eye, but first we must bring Baron the supplies that he asked for. We go ahead and inform him that Humphrey is here to train and that we have brought him 3 swords, where he then asks us for a game of Out of Bounds. After completely embarrassing him in front of his entire troop, he goes ahead and congratulates us as if everything was respectful and definitely not underhanded on my part, but we then need to go and rescue some of the soldiers because they've incited a Cyclops on their location. We head out that way and rescue Randall, who is then rushed back to the encampment for treatment, and Baron thanks us for our help. Back in Vernworth, we go ahead and meet up with Glyndar again, who is begging us to join him for the trial of archery, and we gladly agree to show him up yet again. First, however, it's time for a little Boogaloo in Melve. We meet up with Leonard and then go ahead and do a little trolling on the rest of Thesis' forces, enough to allow the villagers to escape. And they all make their way to Hard Village, where Ulrika is waiting with open arms. That's always been kind of weird to me, how the queen will just simply go take over Melve, but will leave Hard Village completely alone. Like, it's still in Vermund and is barely out of the way. In fact, it's on the way to the checkpoint Rest Town, but they don't have enough forces to then go retake Hard Village. I'm failing to see where the downside of taking over Hard Village is from Vermund's standpoint, but I guess we'll just go along with it. Anyway, we hit Thief rank 7, which is very nice for the amount of skills that we're going to have here in a second, and we go ahead and come back later for Baron's follow-up. As it turns out, Baron has been ousted from his position at the encampment, but we'll have time to think about that later because a Cyclops is currently attacking his flower field. We make short work of him with the gut and run skill and talk to Baron, where he then explains he'll be going his separate ways from here. With a heartfelt goodbye, we then Ferrystone back to Hard Village and then meet up with Ulrika, who is feeling kind of frisky. We have a nice night looking at the stars and only hold hands the whole time, time, just kidding. And after a nice long night at a nice warm hearth, we then encounter Drake number 2. This encounter goes very similarly to the first time we met this Drake, but he does get a little extra tail slap on me, but after 1 health bar's worth of damage is dealt to him, he then flies away again. Seeking to take out my frustration on this Drake always being a coward, I then seek out this ogre. And gain level 23 from a quick fight. That was pretty satisfying. Now we're going to head off to Sacred Arbor to cheer on Glenweir during his trial of archery. In the previous quest location, there appears to be a chimera blocking our way, and this is a good time to talk about the differences between Dragon's Dogma 2 and Dragon's Dogma 1 in terms of chimeras. Dragon's Dogma 2 chimeras appear to be a lot tougher with more defenses and more health than their Dragon's Dogma 1 counterparts. Also in Dragon's Dogma 1, there was a clear pattern that you would take down chimeras in comparison to Dragon's Dogma 2, where you would start with the snake tail and then work your way to the goat and then the lion at the end. For some reason, I find myself taking out the lion first a lot of the time and then taking down the goat without ever taking out the snake. I don't know if that's just me making that choice or if that's the game kind of encouraging you to make that choice, I'm not really sure, but a lot of the time I don't even interact with the snake. Regardless, the chimera goes down after about 5 minutes of fighting and we reach level 24. After beating the chimera, we're then escorted to Sacred Arbor where a cutscene plays. I don't speak a word of Elvish, so we have Glyndor translate for us, and he tells us that his sister is actually caught in a pickle. It seems that the sight of women has excited this ogre into kidnapping Darren, and we will now have to go fetch her. We fight our way through the cave and finally make it to where Darren is being held captive by this ogre, and Glyndor decides that now is the perfect time to have a casual conversation with me while his sister is being actively handled by this ogre.
Well, friend, I shall strike the beast's arm while my father holds detention.
After Glyndor gets over his insecurities, he then nails a shot in the ogre's arm, and we pick up Darren and go drop her in a safe distance away. It is now time to go ape on the ape. After a short battle along with Glyndor and Darren's father, we then make it out to safety and get Daddy's blessing and a port crystal, which is why we did this quest in the first place. This will be used later and duped whenever we finally get around to another part of this adventure that we're going to get to later. This also happens to be the same reason we romanced Ulrika very early on. You'll catch on. Hey, level 25. It's at this point in the adventure where I start doing a lot of escort quests and a lot of side quests in comparison to the main quest. And overall, I don't really know how difficult any fighting is going to be, so I'm trying to get as powerful as possible in as short a period of time as possible. During that effort, I go ahead and head back to Harv Village and agree to escort Leonard, which is on the way to the checkpoint rest town. Along the way, we fight through many hordes of monsters, including hobgoblins, and get to level 26, thankfully, before needing to put down the Cyclops, where Leonard then finally reaches his destination. As this was on the way to the checkpoint rest town, I go ahead and decide to leg it the rest of the way and finally rest for the night after depositing a lot of my items. A couple of side quest interactions later, we can start going towards the objective, which is why I came to the rest town in the first place. We approach the ancient battlefield and witness a titanic fight between a Cyclops and a Drake, which clearly the Drake has the advantage of. During this chaos, I decide it's probably best to attack from a distance, and I start firing the ballista at the Drake as many times as I can. Unfortunately, the Drake does snipe my ballista out of my hands, and I have to attack him on foot. What a bummer that I won't be getting any easy XP today. Unfortunately, this means that the Cyclops also survived, and I'll have to attack both of them at once. Altogether, this fight lasted almost 15 minutes, and during the course of it, I had to make use of the whole healing glitch, I had to use a wake stone. The Cyclops finally died, thankfully, and a few dodged meteors later, I was able to finally get up to the Drake's head and put it into this battle. Hooray, level 27, not bad. Instead of pushing forward like the headstrong warrior I pretend to be, I go ahead and wander all the way back to the checkpoint rest town on foot and decide it's time to rest. Thankfully, enemy spawns are pretty forgiving in Dragon's Dogma 2, which means that I have an empty ancient battlefield I can now wade through without having to fight another Drake. After taking out some harpies, I go ahead and decide to do the quest that escorts Oscar up to the cenotaph, fight our way through the spooky scary skeletons, and Oscar finally gives me a key that he doesn't even know what it goes to. So thanks I guess, but luckily Luckily, I know what this goes to, and it's actually not that bad. There we go, 1 flaming duo spear richer, and I also made sure to get the makeshift vault key. And now we can go ahead and start heading through World's End Cave, which is where the next objective will be for this playthrough, which is going to be the Sphinx. Now, the Sphinx is pulled from Greek mythology and is supposed to deal with riddles that are hard to solve. Unfortunately for her, however, I have the internet and I don't have to actually think about anything. So first things first, I go ahead and do the riddle of conviction and offer up my port crystal, which allows me to dupe it with the answer of this riddle. So yay, we have 2 port crystals. Next, we'll do the riddle of madness, which requires me to bring a beloved up to the cenotaph. You can also offer up your pawn as well to satisfy this, but we don't have a pawn because obviously it's not in the rules. So I go ahead and head to Heart Village, grab Ulrika, go ahead and fairy stone back to the Sphinx and offer her up for port crystal number 3. Honestly, I could probably stop here, but I go ahead and do the Riddle of Eyes to get the ceiling file, which will be useful for a later quest with a certain dwarf, and I go ahead and do the Riddle of Rumination, which was pretty easy to figure out because I have been recording my gameplay, and this is also the first secret token you can realistically get in any playthrough. Alright, so out of these, we have 2 extra port crystals, we got 1 extra wake stone, a ceiling file, and 3 fairy stones, which probably weren't worth actually doing the trip. Now, ordinarily, I would do the Riddle of Wisdom, but that requires me to hire a pawn, so obviously we cannot do it in this playthrough. So that's the end of the Sphinx detour. Maybe in the future there will be a solution to that riddle that won't involve pawns, but I'll leave someone else to solve that at a later date. But we're not done in this area because we're going to go ahead and make a pit stop through the Misty Marches to get to the Griffin Nest, which is inside the forest. And while the Griffin did put up a solid fight, he didn't really stand a chance. So now we are 1 port crystal richer and we are level 29. Without wasting any movements, it's time for us to get to Batal to start the Dulled Steel Cold Forge quest. And because I haven't really planted any port crystals yet, this actually allows me to do a pretty cool little strategy that I call pit stopping. I know I might have mentioned that word a couple of times throughout this playthrough, but this is the time where it actually matters. Oh hey, we got Thief rank number 9, so that's cool. We finished out the Thief, now we can swap over to Warrior whenever we have a chance. Anyway, so the goal here is to head to Wercoat Cavern so that we can cross over into Batal without having to activate the main quest, which will then set some things into motion. There's probably not any tangible advantages to doing it this way, but I figured I would show it off in case anyone gets any ideas for their early game. Oh hey, level 30. So at this point what we're going to do is we're going to plant one of our extra port crystals in Fairy Stone back over to Vernworth to get our loss gauge back up and also to equip some skills. And as soon as we're done resting, we can then Fairy Stone straight back, and here we are. It's as if we never left and we have some extra stats and some extra health. And who said there wasn't fast travel in this game? Just got to work for it a little bit. After a very clean fight with the Drake where we almost no-hit it, damn, it really had to grab me off the head there, had half a health bar left, I'm so freaking mad. Anyway, so that's Drake's history, and now into Wercoat Cavern we get, and we're level 31. Nice. We could probably just run through Wercoat Cavern without having to fight anything to get here earlier, but I like the XP, so we're going to go ahead and fight everything we'd run into. After making it out and arriving in Batal, I decided to make a quick pit stop by the Dragon Forge, mainly to go ahead and place down a port crystal. And in hindsight for this visit, I didn't know how powerful I actually would be at this point, so I went ahead and decided not to buy the extra fairy stones out of fear that I'd probably need the WLC a little bit later. But that fear is actually unfounded. You probably could get fairy stones here because we are so powerful right now. Anyway, we enter the back door of Batal and view the cutscene a little bit early, decide to buy the house, and now we are a permanent resident of Batal without having to get to the quest. Time to talk to a certain dwarf to repair a certain regalia sword. Unfortunately, the dwarf is retired, so that's a little bit awkward, but his assistant offers to help us while he is gone to the tavern, and we have to go get Glimmercoal now from this certain cave. Now, Glimmercoal has a bit of a unique property where you can actually unequip your lantern or turn it off to then make it glow, and this is in contrast to the fake stuff Glimmercoal, which will not glow whenever your lantern is off, but whenever you are close and the lantern's on, they look exactly the same. The cave is overrun with monsters as well, so you want to make sure that you're either quick or you can actually fend off for yourself. After an easy peasy trip and a quick pickup of this in-game gear, which will give a massive reduction in fire damage, Immaculate Blaze, how appropriately named, we quickly return the Glimmercoal, but it turns out that Sarah actually needs an extra little tool in order to work on the regalia sword. She requires a blaze hammer, which is a special type of hammer that is dipped into magma before it can start working on any sort of tool. The only place that's able to provide a blaze hammer is going to be way off in Agamemnon Volcanic Island, so that's a bit of a bummer. We're going to need to make a long trek across Batal in order to get to this place. The route to get there is pretty straightforward, but there really is only one route at this time, and we'll need to go through Drabnir's Grotto, which is an absolute mess of knackers and cyclops and different sort of rattlers, so we're going to need to be prepared for this trip. Don't even ask me how Sarah gets through herself, I have no idea. But we can't let a girl show us up up? We're the Arisen after all, so we go ahead and decide to make out for our trek. There's level 32, and here's Drabnir's Grotto. What a great place. I swear, it's as if the enemies here are just cockroaches waiting to crawl out of every corner. If I hear another catchphrase of meat or got ya at any point of this playthrough, I might explode. Well, at least we got level 33 and probably the best mace in the game. Not that we'll use it. And finally, Agamen Volcanic Island. Finally here. No more Drabnir's Grotto. My goodness. This place is definitely getting a port crystal as soon as I get to the camp. Hopefully there's no more distractions along the way, and there's an old dwarf. Turns out he hurt his back along the way, and he needs wildflowers of all things to restore him back to health. I'm not really sure how the sweet fragrance of wildflowers is going to help him heal his back, but we give him some green varish, and he is now back to where he can walk. After escorting Gastoffer back to his house, it turns out that he's actually married to this elf who is named Cleona. Cleona, as you can see, is a magic archer meister, which we will learn later on in this playthrough, but I figured I'd spoil it for you because I'm just mean. Unfortunately, he's taken too long to give me my reward for escorting him back home, so I go ahead and barge in and...
Fie! My back!
Oh boy, his back is bad again. Instead of wildflowers, he'll need to go all the way to the hot springs, which is in Volcanic Camp, which is a very long way away, and Gastoffer's not exactly the fighting type. But thankfully, we did make a trip over to the Sphinx to grab the sealing vial, so into the vial he goes right in front of his wife. Thankfully, the wife knows her place and does not complain, and we grab his newt liquor for good measure. This will be important later. And off we go. Now, if you've noticed a certain pattern throughout this playthrough, I'm a fan of doing two things at once. So I go ahead and head into the volcanic mountain base cave while Gastoffer is safe in the file, and we make our way safely to Sarah by using the power of Winter's Path. Anyway, after making it to Sarah and seeing that she has her blaze hammer, we make sure to grab Cinder Spine, which is going to be useful for whenever we decide to play warrior and get that knockdown bonus, and we escort her out of the cave just in time in order for her to start work on that regalia sword. So she's happy, I'm happy. Not sure if Gastoffer's happy, he's still in the file, so I guess we better go ahead and head on over to the hot springs and get his back all better. We finally make it to the Volcanic Island camp, and while we're here, we're going to go ahead and purchase the best weapons that money can buy at this point, the Ferme Blades, which are the best thief weapons that you can get at any point in the base game. We do trade down a little bit in knockdown power, but we're going to enhance them later with Dwarven Smithing right after this quest, and the strength value they have is enormous at this point, so this is definitely a great pickup. We go ahead and give this drunk some more liquor. Make sure you drink responsibly. And Gastoffer is finally let out of the file. You know, if I were him, I'd be very grateful that I didn't have to walk all that time, but that being said, I have no idea what it's like being sealed in a file, so I'm not going to complain. Cleona then arrives and supposedly has been watching us the whole time, so that has very many questions. Like, if she was trailing us the whole time, then that means that she witnessed us diverting from the Gastoffer quest and going into a volcanic base cave where her husband could have been sealed inside a file for all of eternity because I may have died in that cave along with my apprentice, and therefore her husband would just be lost to the end of time. But nope, she approves. She apparently is completely okay with this, and now we have unlocked Magic Archer and also get a Meister's Teaching out of it, so I guess she's just really irresponsible. Alright, well, I guess that happened. Now back to Batal, and let's talk to Sarah to get the restored Regalia Sword. Alright, Regalia Sword obtained. Now let's go back to Vernworth and turn in the Regalia Sword to our friend Roman. As soon as we turn in this quest, we can go ahead and start with Dwarven Enhancement in Batal, and now we have officially entered what I like to call the late game. We have the best thief weapons we can buy. We went ahead and maxed out the thief vocation as well. We can also get the best enhancement in the game, so pretty much anything else that comes after this is going to be fairly easy. And also, now that we have access to the best warrior weapon in the game at this point with Cinder Spine, we can go ahead and go to the Vocation Guild to switch to warrior and start working on that dominance augment. Beautiful, just the way I like it. And I like to call this part of the playthrough the screwing around phase, because at this point we're just trying to level up and get as much experience as possible. After a certain point, we go ahead and meet up with Baron for some tea and unlock the Arc of Might Meister's Teaching, as well as befriend Baron's hardened warrior heart. What a handsome beastren. Alright, enough of that brief romance. It's time to officially advance the story, so we return to Brant and go ahead and attend the coronation of Arthur. What is my pawn doing here? Pawns are not allowed in this playthrough. Anyway, sorry about that. We go ahead and head back to Brant to apologize for my pawn's insolence. He's not supposed to be here. And it is at this point that Brant finally directs us to Batal, as is naturally supposed to happen in the story, but of course we skipped ahead as we saw earlier. We officially make it past the gate and find literal God again, and he directs us to the Rock Mouse's burrow, which is where I'll meet Manella. I decide to take the scenic route, and along the way we do bump into a Chimera, but he doesn't last very long. Hey, level 37, making progress. And we're reaching the point where monsters are beginning to practically evaporate upon a single hit, so let's call that foreshadowing for later. I do also manage to bump into a random old lady on top of this palace looking place, and she teaches me how to vape, but we're not about that smoke, so we're gonna completely disregard everything she says. Something oracle, I'd probably believe that too if I was high as a kite. You know, if a drake dies at night and no one's around to see it, doesn't make us. And finally, back in Backbatal, we finally met Manella, who tells us about how badly pawns are prejudiced in Backbatal. Sounds like a base population if I'm honest, I don't really like them either. Literal God then appears to tell us about this old man looking for blue crystals on the beach. Honestly sounds very similar to a certain great television show. And while in Backbatal, we also meet this absolutely irrelevant plot device who somehow is leaning on air. And now we're at the palace, but while we're here, we go ahead and take out her man from deleting the Empress, and Manella goes to a hot spring as a reward. That's just great. Fast forwarding now. Alright, so here we are back on Thief. I guess a little explanation or recap is in order. At some point along the way, we did max out Warrior, so now we're back on Thief. We got the Dominance Augment, so that's all finished. We'll stay on Thief for the rest of the playthrough. I did meet up with this guy named Hugo, but he got betrayed by his bandit leader named Lanzo, who apparently killed his parents and took him in, so that is a bit of an interesting and complicated situation. We went ahead and tracked down Lanzo and ended him, but that ended up making Hugo have nowhere to go, so we did the sensible thing and offered him to go to the Distinguished Noble Distraction Store. And in order to do that, we had to help Wilhelmina delete this corrupt individual, had a nice time with her, and she offered him a job, etc., etc. Now Hugo works at a quote-unquote upstanding place of employment. So I guess that's the best outcome that could have happened. I'm just going to treat this like every other part of Dragon's Dogma 2's story. Just don't think about it too much. After about 1.5 million hours later, we finally meet with the middle-aged Joker and collect these pretty blue crystals for him. And while we're here, we go ahead and Dragon Forge our Ferme blade, so they can literally nuke whatever we want now with that strength stat. It is absolutely massive. Also, in case you were wondering, drakes don't exist anymore. And by the way, lesser dragons also don't exist anymore. Oh yeah, we got to meet this guy again, and this based totally not former Arisen. He coincidentally makes his castle rise out of the sea, and now it's time for us to go back into the cavern and go deep into the bowels. In the middle of this castle, we meet our spirit animal, get a sweet ass sword, and awaken this giant ass statue who's going to wait for us to complete more story elements. And I know the final battle's coming, but you gotta find some time to relax. Don't worry, this giant malicious bronze statue will wait on you. Hello, boys! Alright, this mean old man won't actually give me my sweet ass sword because we have 0 agency in this story, so we get literal God to transfix him. Alright, time to follow phases through the spell seal door, and finally time to face the Talos. Just gonna wait on him to slowly walk this way. Still waiting. Yeah, as one singular character, it's pretty hard to actually stop him early, but we make sure to take out a couple of these stakes because they're gonna be pretty important later for Wakestone shards. And finally, the Talos is done. 20,000 experience is ours, and we can finally progress forward towards the final battle. Phases goes ahead and runs up to the tower, and we check our stats. We are level 50 freaking 6, so we better be ready. For context, my first playthrough with Pawns, I finished at level 50, so we should be ready for anything that comes our way. We go ahead and head up the tower and meet our tragically close friend Ragnar, who's always been there for us and is our best friend, and it's horrible we have to fight him. Oh wait, he's dead. Alright, next we gotta fight through Dara's little troop, and oh yeah, I got glasses. Do you like them? Anyway, Grigora Daddy makes an appearance holding the Giga Chat himself in his paws, and we can't have that, so time to face the Dragon's Dogma. As the dragon drops us from orbit, we somehow survive from the final battle and don't break every bone in our body, and it's time to test our strength. Just gonna hop on his head and see how much damage we do, and oh! Alright, that was quick. I guess it's party time, and what is literal God doing here? After a brief questioning of reality, he sends me back to the dragon, and I completely unalive myself at just the right time, and we wake up to an absolute nightmare. He tries to seduce me with Ulrika, but we ain't no simp, Baron isn't here, and we wake up in the middle of Detroit for the final battle. I gotta be honest, Chicago is looking pretty rad this time of year. They really did a good job with the post-game here. The dragons are looking pretty cool too, can't wait to fight them, but first we have to evacuate the townsfolk. I'm just gonna pick up the best daggers in the game, and now it's time to get to work. After meeting up with the former Arisen, which by the way is a pretty cool little detail, did not realize that Sigurd and Luz were actually former Arisen at the time. At least that's what Luz tells us. I don't make the rules. We can finally head over to the very first dragon boss. It appears that aspects from the brine and the rest of the dragon have actually merged to create a somewhat sort of unique monster. We can't actually climb on any of the brine areas, but they have these neat little eyes that you can poke in order to deal damage. How convenient for literal God to give us a way out. And if you couldn't tell, despite being just one solo Arisen without any pawns, we're pretty overpowered, so this is definitely not the challenge that I thought it was going to be. We move on to evacuate Volcanic Island, dragging Gostoffer in tow, and finally make our way back to the Sacred Arbor, where we have yet another portal to contend with. Before fighting their battles for them, it looks like we have to plant a new tree. Easy enough, and now it's time for the Worm Dragon. This one, in my opinion, is a little bit more difficult, as we have to continuously climb across its body with many different twists and turns to get all the eyes that's on him, and we also have to dodge this mega attack that he does right in the middle of the fight. I learned later you can actually stagger him throughout this entire fight, so it's not something that ever comes up again, but important to note, of course. And there he goes, finally thrashing about as we delete him. That's all the elves evacuated. On to Vernworth. Let's go talk to Brant.
Methinks your majesty would do better to ask this of the Regent King.
Alright, never mind, gotta go talk to Sven. So Sven needs us to do two things. We have to get his mom to talk to him, and we have to claim all the ox carts. Thankfully his mom's just being a little difficult, and we can solve this problem by literally carrying her to her own son. That was pretty embarrassing for her. And thankfully, because we dealt with Allard earlier on, he's not here to give us any trouble with the ox carts. So that was pretty easy. Sven assures us that the evacuation is going to go swimmingly despite his mother, and we go ahead and head on over to the Vernworth dragon fight, which goes about as you expect. We finally get around to head back to Batal, and unfortunately we're required to talk to Phases and get our main pawn back. This part where we revive our pawn is mandatory as far as I can tell to get past the Batal part of this endgame, so unfortunately our pawn is going to gain some levels that he doesn't really deserve. So while the reunion was very happy for my pawn, not so much for me. Into the valley he goes. We go ahead and run to Manila to solve all the townspeople's problems, which is pretty easy honestly, and now we can finally face the dragon's horde of enemies with Phases. We go ahead and speed run through the hordes of enemies and rush through the palace to flank the dragon, finally get around to it and end the threat for good. And it is at this point that we will reach our final level for this playthrough at level 61. Unfortunately, Phases died like a dog, he did, but I'm too nice, so we go ahead and revive him. And now, finally, that everyone's evacuated, we can go face the final dragon. This one is located way off in Volcanic Island, and it's one that I actually missed, so we gotta go all the way over here to face the final worm dragon. This fight goes exactly as you'd expect. We climb up the worm dragon and defeat his eyes one by one, causing him to squirm and crash at many points during the fight. And it isn't long before we put him down for good. Now it's time to rest up and hit that final portal and complete this game for once and for all. And that is Dragon's Dogma 2 without the use of pawns. You know, going into this challenge, I expected a fair bit of difficulty, especially when it came to the beginning segments of the game, and to be fair, it was fairly difficult to get used to everything. I had to make sure to get curatives and dodge moves in the right places, and the thought of not having backup as far as heals go was definitely weighing on me. But as I grew more and more skilled with the vocation I was playing, and also just with enemy patterns in general, it became very trivial to play this game without pawns. At a certain point, once you get past a certain strength level and knockdown power level, and you reach about level 27 or so, the game becomes very easy. I of course beat the game at level 61, but I definitely could have at a much lower level. Especially with a challenge such as the dragon fight, where it's supposed to be a bit of a tougher one, it definitely did not live up to the difficulty that it's made out to be during the story. And hey, part of that is me doing so many side quests that I didn't really show towards the end of the game, so I guess that you could say that me over leveling in a power fantasy definitely would make it a bit easier. But honestly, the dragon died in 3 hits, so I mean, I don't really see a world where that's okay, especially considering that I didn't have any pawns, which is what the game is balanced around in the first place. So with that being said, any challenge runs that I do in the future are definitely going to have to make some additional restrictions, such as no side quests, no boosts, no curatives, and other sorts of limitations that would make sense for that particular playthrough. As it stands currently, Dragon's Dogma 2 is just a fairly easy game past a certain point, and the game could really benefit from a DLC dungeon like they did in Dragon's Dogma 1 with Dark Arisen, or with a hard mode, which was also in the first game. I know that right now on the Nexus there are certain mods that you can download to increase the difficulty of certain bosses as far as health and stagger go, but I would really like to see what they do as far as official updates go in order to remedy this. So anyway, that's my final thoughts on the playthrough. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next one. I'll see you again soon.